Hey everybody, it's April Rashad. Today we're talking about stress and its effects on weight loss. So this is the TLS Weight Loss Solution series of webinars that we're helping you to get some extra information as you go through your weight loss or health journey. But just remember that these webinars are really designed to be an adjunct to the tools that we already have in place, and they're intended to provide extra support and guidance, not intended to replace the tools that we do already use with the TLS system and TLSslim.com. So don't forget about your journal and TLSslim.com to get on there and to get all of the information that's put out by TLS as a company and continue on your journey. So today we're talking about stress, and really, there's three types of stress. One is physical, so if you think about it, if you've had any kind of trauma or illness or even lack of sleep could be looked at as physical stress on your body. That's one type of stress that we would know. Then there's the emotional stress. I think everybody can relate to that. You've got relationships, you've got money, lack of money, or stress around that, work, and things, kids, things of that nature that cause emotional stress. And then there's chemical stress, not everybody always thinks about, but these are the toxins or medications or things that are sort of gumming up your system. All three of these things really kind of work together. And I mean, really, if you think about it, just kind of going back for however many years old you are, these different types of things are going to accumulate over the course of time, and left unchecked or not dealt with, they really can wreak havoc on your body and on your health. But a lot of people respond to stress in different ways, that some people get moody, they could get angry, sad, or both. Some people's sleep gets affected. Either they sleep more or maybe they just have trouble sleeping or falling back to sleep. Other people are emotional eaters when they get stressed out, or they go to drinking or other things. They may want to be alone, or you may be that kind of person that might actually respond positively to stress, and you have tools in place, like you exercise, you meditate, or you do yoga, or you like to be around people, you talk to people, you call a friend, or you go out, or maybe you journal, or you read or engage in other different positive activities. So it's important to sort of take an inventory for yourself in terms of which of those three types of stress you think might be combating your body, and then what are your responses to stress. There may be some areas where you respond very positively to stress, and others where you see that there's definite triggers in your life and that you certainly head in one direction that may not be positive, whether it's going right for the refrigerator or right for the glass of wine at the end of the night or whatever it is, and you're creating these habits, and they're not going to be helping you to achieve the goals that you've set in place. But there's other effects that stress have on our body, and we want to talk about that today, including things at a much more cellular level and a hormonal level, and how that really, sometimes people really underestimate the effect that it can have on your body when you are trying to lose weight or get yourself healthy. So most people have heard of the fight or flight response, so this is your neuroendocrine system that's activating that fight or flight response in a response to some kind of stress on the body. But it doesn't have to be that there's a lion chasing you. The everyday stresses of just waking up, you feel your blood pressure raise because you're getting the kids ready for school, you're getting ready for work, or whatever it is to get out the door, you're in traffic. That heightened amount of stress is a constant stress that our body was never really intended to be able to handle. But nevertheless, we get that fight or flight response. It's just that maybe it doesn't go away within 20 minutes like it used to when your ancestors would get that same type of response. But when that fight or flight response does happen, there are hormones that are released in your body. Most people know you get that jolt of instant energy. That's the adrenaline kicking in, right? So you feel like you could just, you get that burst of energy. Maybe it's the fire alarm goes off in the middle of the night, or you fear that, you hear your child cry because they've fallen down and you're worried that they're getting hurt, and all of a sudden you're heightened. Your senses are up and on alert. You get an instant burst of energy, bolt out the door, that kind of thing. But there's also corticotrophin-releasing hormone, which is, there's an acronym for it that's just called CRH, and that will actually decrease your appetite, but only with acute stress. So you know how sometimes there's just something crazy stressful happens and you feel like you can't eat, you're just not hungry? But that's only with acute type of stress. Most of the kinds of stress actually will increase our appetite, and we're going to talk about that. So then there's cortisol. And this replenishes the body basically after the stress has passed. This is a stress hormone, okay? But the problem is, like I was saying with fight or flight, in your ancestry, there might have been an immediate reaction, or even if it's, your kid, you realize that they've fallen, you get that shoot of adrenaline, you run outside, you realize that they're okay, and things start to settle back down. That's a normal response to fight or flight. But the problem is that because we're under stress all day long, and because we have, medications that are stressing our bodies out, and because we're under sleeping, and because we're not drinking enough water, and we were eating processed food, and you add all of these different components together, and our body seems to always be in a state of emergency. And so cortisol, which is a stress hormone, ends up elevating and not really dropping back down. Now, there's sort of a natural type of bell curve a little bit. Like there are times during the day when your cortisol levels are higher and lower, and they're supposed to be that way. But if they're either completely elevated or your adrenals get fatigued and it's completely gone, neither of those two situations are really a good situation. And what ends up happening is that your appetite increases and you end up getting more fat storage in the abdominal area. And a lot of times we just attribute that to age, but really, like I'm saying, is that this is more of an accumulated effort of how you sort of lived your life and over the course of years. So what it is important to remember, too, is that with the increase in abdominal fat stores, that diabetes, heart disease, the visceral fat, which is that deep-seated belly fat that's sort of marbling your organs, are going to increase, okay? And also, remember that the reason why you're getting an appetite surge with the cortisol, being at higher levels is because our muscles need sugar to run on for that quick energy. We don't burn fat when we have a surge of adrenaline. When we have that fight or flight response, our body's going to try to burn off sugars. And so if we don't have those sugars, or if let's say that they burn off within the first few minutes after that adrenaline surge, but you're stressed throughout the rest of the day, your body is going to crave carbs because they could break down simply to sugars. And it's just sort of a primal way that your body knows what to crave and what to eat. So there's other hormonal responses to stress as well. There's two hormones in particular. They're called ghrelin and leptin, and they work at your appetite, basically. So one of them, called ghrelin, increases your hunger. This is your hunger hormone, if you will. The other one, which is called leptin, makes you feel satiated, and they're both important. They're both necessary, but what happens is that they can be disproportionate for many different reasons. One of the main reasons that they can become disproportionate is due to sleep. Even 2 hours less of sleep, let's say you got 6 or 6.5 hours instead of a good 8 hours of sleep, what happens is if they were supposed to kind of stay, if you imagine them on sort of a parallel line together, and they were sort of together, the ghrelin, which makes you feel hungry, is going to go up, and the leptin, which makes you feel satiated, is going to go down. So the split, if you will, or the disparity between the two is actually going to increase with the less and less sleep you have, which is also why, let's say you have a new baby, and you thought, well, breastfeeding was going to help you to lose weight, but you're so completely sleep deprived that you feel like all you're doing is craving carbohydrates all day. And part of that is because of the lack of sleep, because those hormones have gotten disproportionate and you're not getting the right kind of signals. It's going to require more food to make you feel satiated because of that. So that's one issue that can happen. But ghrelin and leptin can be disproportionate just because we're out of whack. We're just not healthy. We're not eating properly. We're not getting our blood sugars in control. So any of the things that have sort of gotten us to a metabolically challenged state to where we are before we started TLS can end up affecting a lot of different hormones. And it's not just about weight either. Obviously, any kind of hormone dysregulation can put your body at a higher risk for any type of disease. So it's really important to kind of keep these things in check. But it's nice to know that there may be also a physiological reason why you crave foods, whether it's a lack of sleep or a hormone disruption or whatnot. Now, the other thing that can happen with leptin, which is that satiety hormone, is that you can become leptin resistant. Most people have heard of insulin resistance. This is sort of the precursor to diabetes, but what the heck is leptin resistance? This is when, again, your body has leptin that it is producing, but your body is not sensitive to it, so it's not responding in the way that it's supposed to. So that's where I sometimes remind people that the core product that you started when you began with TLS Weight Loss Solution is really important because the ingredients in it have been clinically studied to help with different carbohydrate cravings and to help with serum leptin levels actually decreasing, which means your body is taking it up. It means it's more sensitive to it. And look at the percentage there. Serum leptin, according to studies, went down 46.9%, and serum serotonin with this product went up 28.6%, which really is telling you that you are getting that satiated, I'm happy, I'm full sort of feeling faster than if you weren't taking it. And so it is really important to try to use the tools that you have to be able to manage the behaviors and also to regulate your hormones and get your body physiologically working the way it wants to work so that it can do for you what it needs to be doing. It's not normal to have cravings. I mean, we all, can get a smell of something. We can have nostalgia. We can get around the holidays. We can have those physical, visual stimulus or a smell that might stimulate a craving of some sort. But that physiological craving for food, like you really feel like you have to eat, you're not getting full right away, that's not a normal process in our body. Really, if everything is sort of regulated, we shouldn't be having those different kinds of cravings. So there were other studies other than the serotonin and the leptin that were done on 2 of the specific ingredients that were in core, which one of them is called Lepticor, the other is called Green Select Phytosome. They both showed decreases in weight and body fat percentage, so that was really significant that in an 8-week double-blind placebo study using just the Lepticor and no other changes with people who started around 200 pounds, is that they weren't doing anything different, but by taking that product, they decreased 11.6 pounds over the course of 8 weeks, which is a little more than a pound a week, doing nothing else different. So you could see how using that product would actually just accelerate your results, but more importantly, help to regulate you on a physiological level so that your body is responding the way it should when you eat. But also body fat decreased 2.8%, waist circumference decreased 4.4%, and same with the hips, which was just about 1.8, almost 2 inches in both cases. Total cholesterol dropped 18%, and your bad cholesterol went down 14.7%, where the good cholesterol went up 13.7% using the Lepticor. Then your triglycerides went down 7.1%, fasting blood sugar went down almost 8%, and C-reactive protein, which is an inflammatory marker, went down 15%. So this is where I always just try to remind people that the core, though you have to take it twice a day, it doesn't work unless you take it, but that according to clinical studies, the ingredients in core really are going to help you to accelerate your results, but also to help you to maintain optimal health. And then we've got your adrenal function, and your adrenals are these 2 walnut-sized glands that sit on top of the kidneys, basically, and they produce different classes of hormones at the rate of about a quart a day. But there's different classes. So one class of these stress hormones is like adrenaline and cortisol, and it's called hydrocortisone. Another class of the adrenal hormones actually affects the mineral metabolism, so basically your salt balance, the sodium-potassium balance, which has to do with hydration of your cells in your body. But they also produce sex hormones, so you feeling good, I see the misspelling there, but you feeling good, having energy, and having libido is all really tied into your adrenals as well. And I like to go through this because there's like 30 different symptoms of adrenal fatigue. I've actually experienced it firsthand myself, and I think it's just important to kind of point out for people that sometimes, when they have gotten to a point where their body is just stressed beyond what it can handle, it really does shut down to some extent, and that's when you can get into full-on adrenal fatigue where it just feels like no matter what you do, look at number 1, you have excessive fatigue, you're exhausted, you just feel exhausted all the time. Even if you got 8 or 9 hours of sleep, you feel like even after 2 or 3 days of doing that in a row, you just feel like you can't, wake up. Or you have the non-refreshing sleep. You have insomnia, or your sleep is disturbed. You're feeling overwhelmed or unable to cope. Maybe the things that you're craving are salty or sweet foods, or you have sensitivity to light. One of the quick checks that you can do, though there's other reasons for this, like having a concussion, but if you go ahead and dim the lights, and then you have a flashlight, and you will put the flashlight to your eyes. You could do it with a mirror. It's easier if you have somebody else look and do it for you. But when you put the light up to your eye, so like you're looking away from the flashlight, and you shine the light into your pupil, it should close, okay, because it opens when it's dark, but it should close when the light hits it. If there's a delay in your pupil closing, that's one really quick trick to see if maybe you do have adrenal fatigue, so or that you just feel sensitive to light. But you might have low stamina, and you could be slow to recover from exercises where it just feels like it exhausts you. You could be slow to recover from an injury or an illness. You have a lot of difficulty concentrating more than you would normally, so like that brain fog, and it's not just in the morning and caffeine isn't doing it. It could be poor digestion or any kind of IBS-type symptoms, low immune function, so you just feel like you're getting sick all the time. Or you have, PMS or menopausal-type symptoms, but it's maybe elongated more than normal. Other symptoms that you could experience, low blood pressure, sensitivity to cold, fearfulness, allergies. If you're like me, when I first read this and I was adrenally fatigued, I felt like every single one of these things applied to me. But frequent flu or arthritis, anxiety, irritability, depression, your memory being impaired, and really having a really hard time being able to find words, having little to no sex drive or just a lack of lust for life. So it may feel a little bit like depression, or just might feel like, you're just not in the mood to do anything, or you just don't even, want to look at food sometimes unless you have a craving and you just kind of go all out. Excess hunger or a very low appetite, anything that's on the swing of the high end or the low end, panic or anxiety attacks, irritability, impatience, or quick to anger. So these are some of the different things. If you have if you have one or two, I think everybody has a few of them. But if you really feel like a majority of this list really does apply to you, it's very likely that you do have some level of adrenal fatigue. And so the good news is that your body does want to heal. It just needs the opportunity. So you could actually go ahead and get a test for adrenal function. You could do a saliva test, which you would take 4 times a day because, again, like I said, it's going to be lower, let's say, in the morning, higher at like 2 p.m. It kind of like bells off at different times throughout the day. You could do that quick flashlight test that I just told you, but the good news is that even if you didn't go ahead and get it tested, but you looked at that list of symptoms and you said, you know what, I really do feel like I'm stressed all the time. I feel like my body is just not recovering. I've started to follow TLS and I feel a little bit better and more energy, but I just still feel like this is really affecting me. There are some basic things that you can do to get them working properly again. The first is sleep. At one point I had been to a doctor and she literally wrote me a prescription for sleep. And she said, you're going to need to give this to your husband. I have 3 small kids right now. At the time of this recording, my kids are aged 5 to 10. At the time, they were all under the age of 6, and I was exhausted. And she said, it's really a matter of your health at this point, because I kind of laughed at the prescription when I saw it, but she said, I really just want you to take it that serious, as if I was giving you a prescription for a certain kind of medication, I need you to give this to your husband and tell him that he's the one that needs to help you to fill this prescription. And then, sleep also is going to regulate your ghrelin and your leptin levels, so that's really important. And I know that, adrenal fatigue can affect your sleep negatively. You can look into Isotonix L-tryptophan, taking a really good calcium magnesium product. That either of those things can really help you, either to get to sleep or to stay to sleep, and in a very, very natural way so that you're not taking any kind of medication. But sleep also helps to modulate your cortisol levels. I don't know if you've ever gotten to that point where you feel like you were really tired 8, 9 o'clock, and then you got to 10 o'clock and you didn't go to bed yet, but you got sort of a surge of energy, and then you found yourself watching late night TV or up doing stuff around the house 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning before you went to bed. That's your body wanting you to shut it down by 10 p.m., but instead it got a surge of cortisol, and that's what it's running on now. So it's running on sugars. It's looking for sugars. You're probably muscle wasting at that point. You might start craving foods late night and feeling like you're going to be hungry if you went to bed, if you went to bed after 10 p.m. So you want to try to stop your body from running on cortisol and see if you can really make yourself go to bed earlier in the evening. And, if you have one night where you're up until 11 or 12, okay, but if you try to get it closer to 10 o'clock, that's really when your body wants to shut down, start its detox process a few hours later, and your cortisol levels are naturally going to kind of go with that. The other thing that can help you is, I know that sometimes alcohol at the end of the night or, after dinner or something like that might help to relax you, but in the long term it's actually going to have a negative effect on your sleep patterns, as are electronic devices or any kind of screen. So, even if you have a screen that has light on it, it's an e-reader, and you're in bed reading before bed, sometimes I read on my iPad before bed, that's actually going to hinder your sleep more than if you were reading a book. But if you have the TV on or you fall asleep to it that way, you're on your iPad, your iPhone, that kind of thing, it does negatively affect you. And one other thing that can really help is to make sure that your surroundings are very dark. Then there's exercising, stretching, and relaxing. And again, what I'm going over right now are all the different ways that if you were to get a prescription for how to get your adrenals functioning again, sleep, exercise, stretching, relaxing, these are all ways that they would tell you first. There's no magic pill, but to get them operating, properly again. But, certainly relaxation of either a guided relaxation tape or really just taking some time to do some deep breathing and scheduling in that relaxation time is important because it does stimulate brain chemicals that are going to combat the effects of stress. So that's really important. But also exercising and stretching are going to help to control insulin and sugar in the bloodstream. They're going to use up a lot of your stored fat. Of course, if you have anxious energy, it's going to help you to get rid of that. Your cortisol levels are going to be modulated by exercise, and again, you're going to counter the negative effects of stress hormones just through basic aerobic exercise. And it's not necessarily the weight training that we always promote that for weight loss, but it's the aerobic exercise from the standpoint of your adrenals that may not make you feel fatigued. It doesn't even have to be really intense. It could just be, a nice brisk walk or 20 minutes on the treadmill or, an arc trainer or elliptical machine or something like that that really is going to help you quite a bit. Now, cutting alcohol, tobacco, and caffeine for a specific prescription to help your adrenal function is really important. So if you are feeling like you're adrenally fatigued, these things can help. And then the other great news is that if you are adrenally fatigued, a doctor would tell you to eat low glycemic impact. So getting rid of the sugars, the refined grains, or even all grains, the way you did maybe in the first 6 weeks of the TLS program. But, too much insulin spiking food in general is really going to help you get your adrenals to work properly again. And then there's supplementation. Now, some people will go the route of bioidentical hormones, and I think you'd really have to take the saliva test, some blood tests to really see, have you bottomed out to the point where your body is just in such a need for recovery that it's going to need a little burst. And I don't promote hormone therapy, but the bioidentical hormone therapy is different because they're biologically the same as the hormones in your body versus synthetic ones and can have a really positive effect. So when my adrenals had been fatigued and all of my hormones had bottomed out, including estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA, and all of that, I did go the route of bioidentical hormones. It was a very short stint, and then I was actually able to get pregnant again, and I was okay. At a later time, when I ended up having more inflammation due to a gluten intolerance and things, my hormones were affected again. My adrenals did get affected again from eating the wrong foods, but this was not a typical hormone situation where my body had just been sort of depleted from the pregnancies and lack of sleep and all sorts of things like that. So I was able to really correct that just through supplementation and the other things that I'm talking to you about in terms of the sleep and the exercise. So if you were to supplement, there's a couple of different routes you can go. A calcium with a good magnesium product in it, like the Isotonics Calcium Complete, is the most inexpensive, best way, I feel like, to help with both sleep and your adrenals, and you need it anyway. Plus it has vitamin D in it, which technically is a hormone, or they call it a fat-soluble vitamin, but very, very important. So I love the Isotonics Calcium Complete for that, or the Isotonics Vitamin C. So they're both really good for fat loss, for sleep, and for getting your adrenals working better. Then you've got B vitamins. What's most important is that you get them in an active form. So again, the Isotonics B vitamins are the ones I recommend in their active form because the active form means you don't have to convert them. So B vitamins in general are going to help to combat the effects of stress. They also, I mean, I know people get B12 shots or they feel like B vitamins give you energy. It's not that. It's just that they're involved in the energy production process for ATP, which is energy basically in your body. So when you're deficient in B vitamins, it's like not having all the recipe ingredients or the ingredients to, for your recipe to have a cake made or to have, so you're really just missing something that is required for that process. But they do assist in metabolic functions and carb metabolism. If you drink coffee or caffeine or alcohol or you're stressed out in any way, you're depleting your B vitamins. So it is likely that people are, walking around very depleted of B vitamins. And because they're water soluble and we're typically deficient, we can take them multiple times a day. So sometimes people just take them in the morning and think they're covered, but really they're more beneficial when you take them maybe a few times a day. They do work synergistically with other herbs and botanicals. And while meats are sometimes the best source for those specific B vitamins, because there's a lot of B vitamins and you want to get a complex, but B2, B6, B12, these are really hard to get unless you're eating really good quality meats. Problem is we cook and freeze our meats, and that depletes B vitamins more, whether it's in a vegetable, whether it's in, a red meat. So it is important to take that in supplement form and to take it in an active form, because once your body is already deficient and your adrenals are already fatigued, it is highly unlikely you're going to have what it takes to be able to convert those to their active form. Last would be adaptogens or calming herbs. I love adaptogens. If you think about it, some people get stressed out and they get really amped up. They're anxious, they're on edge, they feel, wound up, and other people get stressed out and they sort of feel tired. They just want to sit down. They don't want to do anything. As you saw from the adrenal fatigue symptom list, there were different ways that you could go. And so what adaptogens are great for is bringing you back to normal. So you'll hear people taking adaptogenic herbs and they'll say, oh my gosh, that totally calmed me down without making me feel drowsy, or I got so much energy from that. And yet they were taking the same thing. And the reason for that is because it brings you back to a state of normal and even, whether you're up or down to start with. So they adapt basically to that environment. So rhodiola, Siberian ginseng, ashwagandha, bacopa, theanine, passion flower, these are all good adaptogenic herbs or calming herbs. The one on the right that has Axe from TLS and the one on the left that says Bliss have similar ingredients in them. So let me just sort of tell you the difference. The Axe product on the right is an acronym basically for adrenal support, cortisol, thyroid, and stress. So everything that really we've been talking about, the ingredients in there are small in amount, but they're incredibly beneficial to help people's adrenals function properly by getting the right nutrients. They have a very calming effect. Some people really do get more energy and their metabolism really starts to work better taking the Axe because their cortisol is modulated, their thyroid is working properly. So, and it doesn't mean that if you're on a thyroid medication you can't. It just means that you, depending on your thyroid condition, you may just need to check with your pharmacist to see if this one is okay for you to take. So that's really important, but that's the Axe from TLS. So that's just one product that has really, really great benefits. Other people like to go the route of both the B complex that we talked about, which you see on the left, and then the Bliss has the adaptogenic herbs and whatnot in it, and that is really just a phenomenal product. So the Bliss is in a pill form. The other two, the B complex in the active form and the OPC3 and antioxidant, are a great combination to be able to just reduce inflammation, get your B vitamin content back to where it needs to be and in its active form, and yet also have the great benefits of all the adaptogenic herbs right in that Bliss kit. And so because you can save so much money, I wanted to just include that. At the time of this recording, that was only $99.95, plus you get $2 cash back ordering that online. So that's just a really good value because the B complex and the OPC3 alone, that OPC3 normally retails for about $70, so you're getting those other two products for an incredible discount. It's a 37% discount on that kit, and it's just a nice way to go as well. So it really just kind of depends. So those are, some of my recommendations. But other stress-relieving tips that also will cut cortisol levels and keep things modulated, just a couple of fun facts. Chewing gum, 12 to 15%, you'll cut your cortisol levels. Listening to music, so get that iPod out and get a great mix going. It's like you could have a go-to-bed mix. You could have a, taking a walk, doing errands around the house mix or whatever, but listening to music in general can cut your cortisol levels by 56%, as long as it's maybe not heavy metal if you're not into heavy metal, you know what I mean? So it's got to be a mix that makes you feel good. Sipping black tea, getting a massage, laughing. So, sometimes having a DVD on hand or, going to on-demand on TV, YouTube, something like that, and watching something funny, having a comedian that you love to be able to do that, or just hanging out with a funny friend, is really beneficial for your health. You've heard it before, but it really is true. Yoga, doing something spiritual, whether it's going to church or praying or whatever it is that you do that's spiritual, or napping can even cut your cortisol levels by 50%. And naps should really just be about a half an hour in duration if they are during the day, or you're going to wake up feeling like you got hit by a train, So a couple of other little fun things that you can do. But in summary, just know that stress has a huge, huge impact on your health and on your weight. And when those stress hormones are out of whack and your body feels like it's in a state of emergency, the most important thing to know is that when your body is in a state of emergency, it wants to hold on to fat, and it's not going to let it go. So even though stress can exacerbate any condition, from a weight management standpoint, you have to be able to have a way to modulate that and get everything working properly again so that your body is willing to let go of fat. Any kind of trauma, any kind of inflammation, any kind of lack of sleep, any kind of hormone dysregulation consists of or could be called a state of emergency for your body from its perspective. Also, hormone dysregulation is going to cause an increase in visceral fat and overall fat, and it's going to lead to heart disease or heart issues, blood sugar issues, and none of those are good. Now, your adrenals are the other thing to consider, and they may fatigue as a result of chronic stress, so keeping an eye on that and following those simple things we talked about in terms of trying to get to bed on time, eating low GI, watching your intake of caffeine and alcohol and things of that nature, making sure that you're supplementing in a way that's going to really help your body to get the nutrients it needs to function properly and also be able to modulate your hormones. And don't underestimate the role of stress when it comes to your weight loss efforts, and you'll be doing really great. So thank you for joining us again. Today's topic was stress, and we'll see you for the next webinar.